What do you say, everybody? Roll Tide. Welcome to Cover Crimson. We got a lot to get into. Bama with an enormous recruiting weekend, and this is the third one that's gone extremely well. We'll get into that. We're going to talk quarterbacks today. Yeah, what about after this coming season? What if Ty Simpson goes to the NFL? Well, we'll get into that as well and more. So like, subscribe, thumbs up, brought to you by our friends at Pearl River Resort over in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Let's get this show started. I know you guys are excited. You haven't seen us all weekend. Well, now we're back. All right, there he is, Clint Lamb, Mick Gillispie. Great to see you guys, as always, here on the channel. And another big weekend, Clint, for Alabama. A lot of 5 stars in town, but you can't build your program just on 5 stars. You go after the best that's out there. Also, some really impressive 4- and 3-star players, and some guys that I feel like will eventually pick Alabama.
Yeah, I think towards the end of this month, things are really going to start picking up for Alabama. A lot of those commitment dates for a lot of your high-profile guys, end of June, beginning of July. So I think you got a couple of week period there that'll be pretty substantial for Alabama. But in the meantime, we're trying to figure out, okay, who else are they trending with? Where else are they looking good? Who else are they targeting? Obviously, you mentioned the new offers at quarterback. What's going on with that position? We'll talk about that more later. But like Brandon Arrington was probably the biggest name in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. A phenomenal athlete, plays corner, plays wide receiver, really a multi-sport athlete, an Olympic level sprinter. I mean, he just brings a different caliber of speed. He's a dynamic playmaker on both sides of the football. Still raw a little bit, still needs to work on some things from a technical standpoint, but just a phenomenal moldable player who can make an impact on both sides of the football for you. Kind of take the Travis Hunter route, I think, is what he's hoping to do. He prefers corner over wide receiver if he had to choose, but wants to play both ways. Obviously you can always use playmakers on both sides of the football, so that would make sense. But this is a 5-star top 10 recruit, got the length that we talk about that they covet both at receiver and in the secondary, and just a really, really good player. And Alabama made some ground with him. They had seemed to be in pretty good shape before. This kid's from California. He's out on the West Coast, had several schools pushing for him, but it kind of seemed like Alabama had faded maybe a little bit. I think they've put themselves back in a pretty good position. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get him, but they did what they needed to do on that front and would be a phenomenal get for Alabama's class. And then you had other guys, like a Roman Voss, who is a tight end out of Minnesota, who is I think the number 1 player in the state of Minnesota. And I was going back and looking at his high school film just because that's a guy that I know Alabama's targeting. A do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades player. I mean, you see him at quarterback mostly, but he lines up at receiver, whether it be a perimeter receiver, a big slot, a little bit of tight end, plays some safety on defense, but mostly you're seeing him as a quarterback. And when you turn on his highlight tape, the throws really don't even come until like the second half of the tape, because I don't think a lot of people are viewing him as a quarterback on the next level. I mean, got a little Blake Sims in him where he can throw those deep balls, got a really good touch and stuff, but just probably didn't have all the tools, the requirements needed to play that position at a high level. But that's why he's being recruited as a tight end, 6'4", 230 pounds, runs a 4.6 40. There will be pressure to stay home, and Alabama is in really good position for Max Sutter, who is a top 100 recruit as well. But a little bit of the way he's used on the high school level, at least, a little bit of Taysom Hill in him. Just a kind of gadgety player, does a lot of different things extremely well. You saw a lot of different quarterback runs, zone reads, inside zone counters, lead sweeps. He was a fun evaluation, and I would be curious to see exactly what his ceiling would look like if he were to go to Alabama, because he would be focusing on one position, and it's one that I think he's got a lot of upside in. And so, this is a 4-star player, a top, 175 recruit, the number 8 athlete in the country, according to On3. Would be another one that I would be very curious to see what ends up happening with him. Does Alabama take 2 tight ends? Is Voss one of those players? He'll have a lot of pressure to stay home in state at Minnesota. They're pushing hard for him. That'll be tough for Alabama to overcome. But like, that's another guy who was visiting this weekend who I really like, and I'm excited to see how that ends up turning out.
And you talk about Arrington being from California. Utu from California, they just got him. And then the last recruiting class, they used and I'm talking about Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan and the staff, their connections in California to bring in some of their best players. Dijon Lee from California, Jackson Lloyd from California, the kickers from California that we haven't seen yet, by the way. Cavante Henry from California. I mean, you go down the list and it's like, I'm just trying to think of all these guys offhand, but I mean, like every time you turn around, oh yeah, Abdul Sanders, Chuck McDonald from California. So you walk into the locker room and it's like, hey, I know Caleb Edwards. There's so many dudes who are in that recruiting class from last year that are from California for Arrington. It's got to feel like a homecoming.
It's a pretty good pipeline. Obviously, Nick Saban did a phenomenal job. I mean, you go back, Jonah Williams, Tua Tagovailoa being out there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously not from California, but like Bryce Young specifically from California,
right.
Najee Harris.
Yeah,
just a ton of players that Nick Saban recruited, and this kind of continue with that familiarity and that comfortability with Kalen DeBoer and his staff on the West Coast. It's a pretty easy connection, but I also think the Southern hospitality that comes with, being in a place like Alabama, that's appealing. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be for everybody, but I think they've done a phenomenal job of going out there and recruiting quality, strong players who can make that transition from, it's a complete culture shock relative to what they're used to, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. It would be a culture shock for me if I moved out there. I could tell you that. And so there's an adjustment period for anybody that does that, but having that familiarity already at Alabama with a lot of players who have gone through similar transitions, it would be a pretty easy link there as far as a guy like Brandon Arrington. And once again, just how he would fit, I think he's got the right stuff mentally. Obviously, NIL is going to play a pretty significant factor with him. And if that's the most important factor and it's all about going to the highest bidder, don't think Alabama's going to be the guy or the team that ultimately lands him. But I do think that, if Alabama could figure out a way to get that done, they are getting a phenomenal athlete with tremendous upside on both sides of the football. Might end up just playing exclusively corner, could end up playing maybe receiver, or maybe he ends up doing both. But either way, Alabama would be getting a hell of a player.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they pull him in. But there were a bunch of other guys there as well. And you kind of got into some of those, the other guys that we saw this past weekend. And Elijah Golden, the guy from Sarasota, Florida, Nick Abrams, who I've been keeping a close eye on, linebacker out of Owings Mills, Maryland, McDonough School, has Georgia after him, Michigan after him. These are all the same battles that Saban fought, so I think that's a good sign for Alabama. I remember when Shula was recruiting, it was like, you may have a couple of those, but it was like Alabama against the lower tier schools. I think as long as you're winning some of these battles against the top schools in the country, your recruiting class is going to be good. I know the rankings slid now according to On3 out of the top 10, but I feel like part of that's that they only have 6 guys committed right now.
Yeah, and I'm once again, I'm not overly shocked. For anybody that is concerned, let's talk a month from now, and I promise you, if Alabama is still not in the position that you want them to be in, and if you're being unrealistic and you're talking about number 1 recruiting classes and 6 5-stars already committed, I can't really help you. But if you're living in the real world with this, let's talk then. If you're still concerned about things in mid-July, we can really start to have that conversation, and I'll be right there on board with you. I just think that, Alabama doesn't officially have some of these guys on board, and I don't even necessarily know exactly who some of these guys are going to be, but I do think that they're in play for enough really good players, and the stuff like Hayes Fawcett that we covered last week. Mm-hmm. Alabama's got 3 commitments coming down the pipe. I think they're going to be 3 really good players, really going to bolster this class, and that will be far from the only 3 players Alabama's getting over the course of the next month or so, maybe a little bit under a month.
Yeah, the guy I'm really keeping an eye on is Crowell, the running back out of Jackson, and I see he's a 5-star now, according to some of the services. He's another guy that's made a ton of visits to Tuscaloosa. I feel like him and Tank Jones to me are the guys that you really got to get. I think you got to get the top guys in Alabama. You may even look at them and go, you know what, I like them, but maybe I don't like them as much. You have to send a message that you're still getting the best players in Alabama. If it becomes Auburn, when Auburn was winning Iron Bowls, when Auburn was really challenging for championships, they did very well in the state of Alabama. Saban came in and then started cleaning up. Now, I know it's a different world now with NIL money. They can put all their money into these guys from Alabama, but I think it's a priority for Alabama to win these battles.
It 100% is. And once again, it's like we were talking about last week with Tank Jones. If they get Nolan Wilson, if they get a guy like Titan Davis who has some of that inside-out ability on top of what they already have, Jamarian Matthews being a guy who could play Wolf, he could play Bandit. Tank Jones is definitely a guy the staff will still want and still covet. I'm just saying that's the type, if they miss that, that's going to be unfortunate because he's personally one of my favorite players in this class. But right. They just had to have him. I don't think it would be as much, even though, Tank Jones is going to be coming in this weekend. Cedarian Morgan's going to be there in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Xavier Crowell, you were just talking about him. Max Sutter, who is that tight end that I just mentioned. Alabama was in really good shape with him out of Illinois. They've got some big-time visitors for this upcoming weekend. We'll be talking about them more throughout this week heading in. But, I think that if they can start to close on some of these guys, including Xavier Crowell, who I feel really good about, and I think you should too if you're an Alabama fan. This is a guy who reclassified. He's now earned that 5-star status that you're talking about, was already considered, favorably according to every recruiting service, but he's certainly in that elite category. Alabama has landed some really good running backs in recent years. Justice Haynes was a borderline 5-star. Some places had him as a 5-star. A.K. Deere was a top 70 recruit. Some places, had him up in that 5-star range, maybe in the top 40 or so. But Xavier Crowell, especially being a guy who, because when you reclassify, a lot of times that ends up hurting you as far as where you end up in the recruiting rankings. Like Austin Mack, when he reclassified, he would have been ranked much higher as a recruit. But it's just you have one less year of film to go off of and the evaluation and the growth and all those things. So it's a little bit harder of a prediction for a lot of these recruiting services. But that just tells you everything you need to know about guys like Ryan Williams and Xavier Crowell. When they're able to make that jump and they stay up there in that conversation. LT Overton is another one from a few years ago when he went to Texas A&M. Did he take a little while? Yes, but he ended up being that player that everybody expected him to be. So Xavier Crowell would certainly be an excellent get for Alabama, would really provide a complementary element for the future in this Kalen DeBoer offense that we're expecting to continue to be kind of high profile and want to sling the football around. When you've got a dynamic back like Xavier Crowell that can do a lot of different things for you, really will open up the other elements of your offense and present opportunities for them to where, if you're playing against light boxes, a lot of too high stuff, trying to slow down that vertical passing game, a guy like Xavier Crowell, he's going to feast in those types of situations. So really like what he could potentially provide Alabama's offense as well.
Guys, I know it's vacation season, and I know that you know all about winning. Well, check out the Residence Inn, Ocean City, Maryland. Back to back Coastal Style Hotel of the Year. This thing is just an amazing spot. Look at it on there. It's just right on the water in Ocean City. It's a great getaway. I went there as a kid. I loved it. I can't wait to go hang out with Keith and the crew. Keith's from Decatur. He knows all about Alabama. And he knows that you guys want a great beach getaway. Well, check out an awesome hotel, a great experience. The guys from the Next Round went there a couple years ago. They had a blast, and we're working on going there ourselves. But we appreciate them being a part of it. But check them out, man. I mean, I'm telling you, you want to find somewhere cool to go. Residence Inn, Ocean City. And you saw the hotel there in the video if you guys are watching. Wow. I know you're getting jealous, Clint. I know you need a vacation.
You know what? We keep talking about actually putting some of this stuff together. Like when you go somewhere, because you're a traveler. I mean, you're all the time. It feels like you live in your car. I mean, I really hope you get good gas mileage because you sure pound the pavement a little bit when it comes to going all over the place. one of these days I'm going to join you in one of these spots. We're going to have a hell of a time. Why not Ocean City, man? I mean, I've been up there before and it was fantastic. Let's make a trip. We could do a live show from there. Have a little bit of fun. I'm all for becoming more well-traveled. That's kind of one of my goals. That's not necessarily related to going to a football game, but I can use work as a really good excuse.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That'd be fun. All right, let's talk about quarterbacks now, Clint. Bama offers some quarterbacks for 2026. Obviously they got Keelan Russell that's there. Everybody expects him to kind of be the guy, but you can't quit recruiting QBs. You got to keep on bringing them in because you never know what's going to happen.
That's exactly right. And, they obviously everybody knows about Jet Tomala and Matt Ponatowski. We've talked about them pretty extensively. We can kind of maybe get into some of the differences, the nuanced differences in some of their games. Like Tomala, is a little bit, he's not as polished, but the upside with him is fantastic. Obviously he brings a little bit more size to the position as far as being 6'4", 6'5", compared to Ponatowski, who's only 6'1", 6'2". But, Tomala is currently committed to Iowa State. Ponatowski, you're worried about baseball and just how that fits in. And it's not the MLB. It's more so, I think, college level baseball. But, you don't know what those conversations have looked like with Kalen DeBoer and company. You don't know if, maybe there's more desirable baseball locations for him. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen as far as the baseball football relationship. So Alabama has continued to try to land somebody in this 2026 cycle. And they went out and Tayden Kawa, I think is how you say it, Kawa, out of Utah, was originally from Hawaii and made the transfer before last season, really improved as far as just his continued growth. 6'4", 225 pounds is what he's listed at. ESPN has him listed as 6'5", 235 pounds. One of the biggest frames, as far as size and frames, and he's probably going to be a guy who's 240, 245, being 6'4", 6'5", but also brings a little bit of athleticism, good mechanically. When you compare him to some of these other quarterbacks, maybe doesn't have the zip and the umph as far as the third level necessarily that maybe some of these other guys have, but he's very under controlled when things break down around him. He does not panic. The escapability is there. He keeps his eyes downfield. Definitely has enough mobility for a Kalen DeBoer offense, but it's not really primary for him. It's more of, it's not athleticism that he wants to use to run a ton, but he is willing to. But it's more so escapability, making plays on the move. But shows a willingness to step up in the pocket. I just don't think that he brings as much umph as far as that third level, at least not that I've seen on tape, but he's still really good. But then Bryson Beavers is the one that everybody's kind of talking about because he landed an offer this weekend, was committed to Boise State, was only a 3-star recruit, but he's really starting to see his recruitment take off. And granted, based off of what I saw on tape, I didn't see a Keelan Russell caliber player. I mean, I'm just speaking candidly, but he feels similar in the sense where maybe he was committed to a lower level school, was only a 3-star. He's now participating in that Elite 11 this week, really starting to see his recruitment rise. Oregon's offered, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, they've offered. Cal's come in. So like several schools have really started to push for him and his services. He was at Ole Miss on a visit and then left to go to Tuscaloosa for an unofficial visit. We think that went pretty well, but it was probably like a preliminary thing. He's just now getting offered, getting a feel. But this guy seems like the type of player where I'm not saying he's going to make a Keelan Russell type of jump from being a 3-star committed to Boise State to being a top 2 or 3 player in the country who's committed to a Georgia or an Alabama or an Ohio State. I'm not necessarily saying that, but he's going to continue to climb in these recruiting rankings. Already listed as a 4-star, according to On3, a top 20 quarterback. Everywhere else, I think the consensus on him or the industry rankings has him as the 55th ranked quarterback right now and only a 3-star. So you'll see that continue to climb as people watch his tape. I thought it was pretty interesting being 6'3", 195 pounds, kind of a little bit lighter. It doesn't churn out the gritty, tough yards on the ground like this player did, but he brings some similarities to me to a Jackson Dart, just as far as like the good, sturdy frame, I think he's listed at 6'3", 195 pounds. I think coming out of high school, Jackson Dart was listed at 6'3", 210, and I think that was after his senior season. So obviously there's time for Beavers to or Beaver, I think is actually what it is. I keep saying Beavers, but for him to continue to get bigger and stronger, but he's got good strength, throws with timing and anticipation, got fantastic touch, can layer the throws to different levels of the field, solid athlete. Once again, not a dynamic runner, but he does have the ability to escape and create on the move, and he can create off script and outside the pocket and do all that stuff. So he's a fun player as well. I've watched all of these quarterbacks, and I think they all bring different elements or things that you like, but Beaver might be one. Overall, he might be my favorite of the four that they've recently offered that they're kind of pushing for.
Guys, we're presented by, there you go, Roback. Use that code Crimson20 and look good at your Alabama football games this year, whether it's that hoodie or some of their amazing polos as well. Our promo code is Crimson20. That's 20% off at roback.com. Also, golf time. Coker and I were at the Steve Azar Delta Soul golf tournament this past weekend. And Coker was decked out in Roback every day. He loves it. I mean, he's always wanted them to send him a new box of stuff. You guys can get your box with that code Room20. So, we're kind of getting into the quarterback situation, right? You gave us a lot of the guys that you feel like are going to be recruited. Obviously you like Beaver. And who wouldn't, right? But the bottom line is this: after this season, what are we looking at the quarterback position, right?
Yeah,
you got is Ty Simpson going to be in the NFL? Is he coming back? Could Keelan Russell come up and take the number one job?
Well, I think everybody knows between Seaborn and Rivers, Gunnar Rivers, which is Phillip Rivers' son, both in-state quarterbacks for the 2027 class. That a lot of people feel like that this 2026 group is more of a bridge. Obviously things can happen. You can't automatically bank on that. You don't know that you're necessarily going to land where those two guys or land an elite quarterback. Granted, it's Kalen DeBoer. It's the University of Alabama. It should be a pretty desirable place for quarterbacks. And obviously Ty Simpson having a massive season, or if it ends up being Keelan Russell, or if it ends up being Austin Mack, whoever ends up being the quarterback, that would make the offense and all of that continue to be desirable. But you got to think, like, Austin Mack is a guy who a lot of people were worried about transferring this year, and they've got him to stick around. He's going to stick it out, continue to develop. We'll see how that turns out. Has a lot of naturally God-gifted ability, but we don't know what's going to happen with him. Keelan Russell's a guy we know he's willing to sit, more than willing to sit for at least a year if he has to. I don't know what his thoughts are beyond that. Is he an Arch Manning where he's like a very highly rated guy who's willing to sit and wait his turn? It's possible, but starting in 2026, the conversation gets interesting because it could work out in a number of different directions. Ty Simpson could be good enough to move on to the NFL, but what if he's not? Austin Mack will then be going into his redshirt junior season. Probably would want to make the move elsewhere. A guy like Keelan Russell, is he willing to sit for multiple years? We don't know one way or the other. So that would be a conversation that needed to be had. It's possible that you lose both your two other quarterbacks. It's just very possible that no matter what ends up happening with your quarterback room in 2025, you're probably losing at least one after this season, even though they could all technically be back, or you could lose up to two. So you've got to really try to, not only do I think they'll try to land at least one quarterback in this 2026 class, it's possible they end up trying to target and get two. Don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, but I also think they would try to get somebody out of the transfer portal. And what caliber of player is that? I don't know. I think the best case scenario for Alabama would be for Ty Simpson to have a phenomenal year this year, move on to the NFL, and then Keelan Russell is kind of going to be in that battle. Maybe you can hang on to Austin Mack for a while. Maybe he's willing to stick around. Probably not, though, if Keelan Russell ends up being the guy. But you could target somebody in the transfer portal to come in and compete with Keelan, and then you can bring in one of these young guys, hopefully, and you've still got three quarterbacks on the roster for 2026. Then you can target and try to do whatever you're going to do in 2027. So it's there's a lot of different ways that it could work out, but you can see the coaching staff kind of playing 3D chess here, where they're looking towards the future, making sure that they've got numbers and quality options there in the quarterback room, because that's a critical piece, obviously, not only to Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's offense, but for pretty much any offense out there.
Bama's been pretty lucky as far as like injuries to quarterbacks go, since Saban. I mean, remember the year where Brody Croyle got hurt, Spencer Pennington got hurt, Brandon Alvarez was like kind of
Mark
running
Gillen
around back there. Then he got hurt, and we didn't even know who was going to be quarterback for a while.
Mark Gillen.
Mark Gillen, right. So, I mean, you have to have a pool of guys that you can put in there. I remember that Florida State one year lost to Tennessee. I guess it was 98 in the national championship. They just didn't have any quarterbacks. All their quarterbacks got hurt, remember? And then they had like a wide receiver playing quarterbacks. And not only did they not have that guy catching passes, he's trying to throw the ball. So you really have to have depth and good depth at the quarterback spot.
Man, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the name, but the receiver for Kentucky a few years ago who ended up having to play quarterback.
Cobb? Was it Cobb?
No, it wasn't Cobb. No. Cobb was a lot, because that's exactly who I'm thinking of, and I can't get off that name. I'll think of it, I guess, here soon.
But I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Their entire offense was.
And they couldn't even throw the ball. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. It was just. And that's something that you could end up running into. And now, I mean, the idea of getting 4 quarterbacks on your roster in any particular year, that's a luxury.
Yep.
But if you've got 3. If one injury happens, you're down to 2. And typically, if an injury does happen, it's going to happen to the person who's actually out there playing. And typically, at least one of those quarterbacks is going to be a freshman. So now your quarterback room, if it's serious, it could turn into maybe 2 young guys who are battling it out or trying to provide that depth, or at least one who has little to no experience. And now you're one injury away from things getting really rough. It's like, this game, the health of your quarterback room is more important now, in my opinion, than it's probably ever been.
Yeah.
And Alabama has been pretty fortunate. Granted, Bryce Young, just a couple of years ago, he did have to miss some time, but it wasn't something that was long-term. Tua Tagovailoa, him going down, that kind of, I thought Alabama got about as good a play out of Mac Jones as you could have possibly have gotten out of your backup. And I've always said Steve Sarkisian making the pivot to building the offense around what Mac Jones did well versus what Tua Tagovailoa did well, which was a little bit different. One of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen, because they did that on the fly, and they got really effective play. And a lot of people will blame the Iron Bowl on Mac Jones. He played a phenomenal game. He made one ill-advised throw, not 2, 1. And so I think but still, when you lose a Heisman caliber player like Tua Tagovailoa, who ended up being a top 5 pick, I don't care how good your backup is, it's very tough to get that level of play.
Right.
So Alabama has dealt with some injuries and had to overcome that a little bit, but they have been pretty fortunate because, I mean, not everybody, look at Florida State. When they lose Jordan Travis, their backup didn't come in and provide Mac Jones-like production. And had he have, they probably would have made the college football playoff over Alabama.
Right.
So, it is a very critical element to what people are doing offensively and in team success. That's why there's probably going to be some extra precautions. But, that's why keeping a guy like Austin Mack in the fold was so important, because whether he's the 2 or the 3, or maybe even the 1, you've got a little bit more flexibility, because I think that any of these 3 guys, if they ended up being Alabama's starting quarterback, would you have some growing pains with an Austin Mack or a Keelan Russell? Could it end up costing you a game? Absolutely. But I think that just knowing the offense, being a fit for the offense, being relatively ready, I think Alabama's in as good of a position as probably, I wouldn't say any team in college football, but most teams in college football for sure, which is yet another reason why I say if they can get good play out of that room, which I expect, I think that they are going to be able to push for national championship, because they also got depth at that position.
Brought to you by Pearl River over in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Dancing Rabbit Golf Course, the Augusta you can play, the Azaleas, the Oaks, 2 just amazing multi-million-dollar courses, and brand new golf carts. They just do it all there. They got everything you need. And if you love golf, you need to check it out. You don't have to have a membership to play. Who's coming in this weekend? Who do we have next in the recruiting roundtable? I know a couple guys, but I'm excited to hear who you are looking forward to the most.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you got a couple of commitments in Zion Gibson and Chris Booker. Those are going to be two that's like got to hang on to those guys. Both are really important pieces to the class, both 4-star recruits. Obviously, Zion Gibson's a top 100 guy. But then, like I said, you got Xavier Crowell coming in. You got Tank Jones. You got Sadarian Morgan. These are all guys that Alabama is in really good position to land. You might start seeing some of these guys pop and really the ball get rolling with this Alabama recruiting class. But I mean, right now, a lot of the big name players, I mean, they've kind of a lot of it's defense right now. So if you can start getting some of these, receivers and running backs and stuff to pop, obviously Max Sutter's another one being a top, I think the number 6 tight end, a top 100 recruit. Maybe being able to close on him would really help from an offensive standpoint. But Ryan Estrada, a 4-star running back from El Dorado High School in El Paso, Texas. You got Anthony Davis. You got Javari Barnett. You got Lasiah Jackson, Emmanuel Ruffin, Zay Hall, the 3-star linebacker. That's going to be somebody I'm going to be looking at because I think off-ball linebacker right now, Sincere Johnson's going to be announcing this week, probably going to go to Ohio State. Obviously Alabama's looking at some other guys, but we're expecting them to lose, which is probably going to be, Justin Jefferson, obviously Nikai Hill-Green. I mean, you're probably losing your top 3 linebackers on this roster following 2025. So they've got to continue to build and replenish that depth for the future. Already got some good players, but Zay Hall is going to be somebody I'm going to be taking a look at. And then Mitchell Smith, a 3-star offensive lineman out of Mississippi. He's also going to be on campus as well. So a lot of big name players, a lot of important pieces. And this is kind of the weekend, Mick. Everybody talks about the coveted last visit. Alabama's getting that for a lot of these guys, and so we'll see how it turns out for them.
Yeah, exciting times. All right, well, we'll do it again tomorrow, guys. We appreciate you being here. You can follow us not just on the YouTube channel, and Clint will tell you that we give you a lot of different options to catch the show.
Yeah, not only can you watch on YouTube, which I would say a huge percentage of our audience does right now. You can also go over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, search Cover Crimson Podcast Network, and follow, download, leave a 5-star review to kind of get us in the algorithm. If you enjoy listening, that would really help us. We're really trying to build that element out right now. A lot of people have been answering the call, and we very much appreciate that, but we need to continue to build that as much as possible, especially before SEC Media Days and before the college football season. So once again, we appreciate everybody who listens every day. It means the world to us. We're continuing to grow. And, we just appreciate you guys so much.
Guys, if you are trying to pimp out the man cave, I talk about this a lot, newlifeart.com. Use our promo code Crimson. Buy one, get half off on just about everything except the new releases. That's at newlifeart.com. Daniel Moore's got you covered. And so do we with our promo code Crimson. And then finally, we are always presented by Pearl River Resort. You got Vegas-style sports gambling at the Timeout Sports Lounge, which is right there in Golden Moon Casino, hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 and change from Birmingham. They have everything you need there. We talked about Dancing Rabbit, Geyser Falls, the water park. They've got concerts and comedians. Jeff Dunham's going to be there with all of his puppets this summer. And, but a lot of other great acts as well. And it's not far. I mean, that's the thing. You don't have to go far to get there, but it's a great facility and you're going to love it. They got everything you need. So check them out. That is Pearl River Resort. All right, Clint, let's do it tomorrow. Roll Tide, everybody.
To Pearl River Resort.